Hello, teachers. We are getting ready to have a conversation about having our students have conversations. We're going to talk about how to get our students actively involved in academic discussions around our content. In the email you received with this video link, there's another link to the Google Doc. So I want to make sure you've had a chance to open that Google Doc, and you will see that there are lots of opportunities for you to take notes as we go through our presentation. Also, I want you to notice that ideally, you could be watching this video with a teacher who teaches next door to you or your entire grade level team for maximum benefit. Here on the screen, you can see a quote, and it says, "Learning how to conduct an effective classroom discussion is an essential skill for any teacher to master." However, I don't think we are born knowing how to get our students deeply involved in these conversations. It is a skill that we have to work on. So let's kick off by talking about what you already do in your classes to make this happen. So let's turn and talk about Turn and Talk. How often do you do it? How do you make it happen? And most importantly, that third question, what do you notice about student responses after partnering as opposed to when you have the same students raising their hands and answering questions each time? If you are watching with a team or a partner, go ahead and hit pause right now and talk about the answers to those three questions. All right, well, hopefully you paused and had a conversation with a partner. If not, we are just going to carry on. If you are watching on your own, no worries. The information that I'm going to share with you today comes from a book called The Core Six, which is just chock full of some really great strategies, 6 really great strategies to deepen the learning that your students have in your classroom. The one that they use for partnering, they call it Circle of Knowledge. So what is Circle of Knowledge? Well, it's a framework for planning and conducting a discussion. And you might notice that it might be one of the blanks you can fill in on your Google Doc. Circle of Knowledge gives us a framework for how to have these conversations. Also on our Google Doc, we have some reasons. Why would we want to partner our students? Why would we not just want to call on whoever raises their hand? Well, let's talk about a few reasons. One reason is that effective communication is a crucial skill for our students. Whether our students are going to go straight to college or straight into a career, it is going to be vital that they are good communicators, no matter what field they go into. So take a moment and read that quote there on the screen. And the key word for us here is these ample opportunities. Who's going to give them those ample opportunities? Well, that's us. We are going to provide these opportunities to have rich, structured conversations, whole class, small groups, and partnering. Another reason we want to use Circle of Knowledge or partnering is that speaking and listening require thinking. What do we want our students to do with our subject matter? We want them to think about it deeply. Well, how are they going to think about it deeply? They need to be able to speak about it and listen to others speak about it. Here on the screen, you will see that I've quoted some state standards around college and career readiness about speaking and listening. And there at the bottom of the screen, for best results, we want to build our questions around build our discussions around text-dependent questions so that they are always having to go back into the text to guide their discussion. And we're going to extend that discussion into provisional writing to deepen it even more. Another reason that we want to have these partnering conversations is that these discussions build collaborative and interpersonal skills. And there's a quote I'll let you read there on the screen. We know that we are going to need to get along with people who think differently from us. I mean, heavens, couldn't our world use more of that right now? So a way we can make that happen in our classroom is by partnering our students and letting them talk to each other and hear different perspectives and learn that we can have a conversation with people who we disagree with. What a wonder, right? So why are class discussions so important? Another quote that I will let you read there on the screen. I think you would agree that everything there listed in that quote is something that we want for our students, especially this, an increased ability to handle rigorous content. Yes, please, sign me up for that, right? Deeper comprehension? Yes, that's exactly what we want. And then there are other benefits like social benefits, greater empathy, respect for their peers. These are why classroom discussions are so important. So, which of those reasons stood out to you the most? What about the research stood out to you? If you are watching with a partner, go ahead and press pause again and answer those questions there on the screen. Okay, so now it's time to get real. How do we make it happen? Here's what I want you to know, teachers. We are used to asking a question and having one student answer at a time. We call on those who raise their hands, but here's the problem with that. When one student talks, one student thinks. And in your class, you know who you can expect to raise their hand, don't you? You know who you can expect to be able to call on. You know who you can expect to be able to give good answers in your class. Rather than call on those same students over and over, we want everyone in our class answering. And the way we're going to make that happen is with partnering. Here's the deal, teachers. You know who the real problem is? It's us. Our kids aren't going to have this happen on their own. We are the ones who have to make this happen in our classroom. But how do we go from everyone raising their hands and wanting to talk all at the same time or to this? How do we go to some good partnering, good discussions? Well, teachers, we have to create new habits within ourselves. Here you can see a couple of examples of how to get started with this. Now, this is an example that you would see in elementary school, probably not so much in intermediate, middle school, high school. However, the thought is the same. We have to decide as the teacher, what is it that I expect from my students? What exactly are the norms that I want from my students? And then I need to let them know what that looks like. I need to create a poster that would tell them, here is exactly how I want you to think, pair, share, so that my expectations are out there. And from there, I love these posters for intermediate and middle school, high school, because this is how we keep the conversation going. One student answers, and then they sit and stare at each other, right? So here are some ideas. Can you tell me more? Can you give me another example so I can understand? Or down here at the bottom, I agree with that what you said because, or I disagree with you because I respect your opinion, but this is a great way to teach our students that we can have a civil disagreement. And here are ways to keep the conversation going and growing. I have a different opinion because, and again, if we have those text-dependent questions, then we are always going back to the text to validate what it is that we believe. So here's the way that I trained myself to do partnering in my classroom. You may have heard this story before. I told myself, okay, we're going to partner. That is my goal for this year. I'm going to have my students turn and talk. I don't want one student talking and one student thinking. I want everyone thinking. So if I ask my students a question and they raise their hands to answer, I'm going to say, oh, I did it wrong. I'm sorry. I meant to say turn and tell your partner. Put your hands down, turn and tell your partner. Until it became my habit, that was how I reminded myself. If the hands went up, then I would say, oh, turn and tell your partner. Now, here's the thing. There's definitely a place for hand raising. And there's also a place for just shout out the answer. Not every single thing has to be a partnering conversation. However, I would say that a partnering conversation needs to be the primary way that our students are answering our questions. Because if they're raising their hand, then it's one student talking, one student thinking. If they're telling a partner, then everyone has an opportunity to answer. So let's get practical. How do we make this happen? Well, the first thing we have to do is partner them up. Now, teachers, you know who can and can't be partnered. So, use your wise strategies that you have to partner those students. Then you're going to share those norms that you created. What are your expectations? And practice those expectations with some non-academic questions like, okay, Get with your partner and tell them what you had for dinner last night. Great. Now, partner, reflect back. What did you hear your partner say? Super. Now switch up and tell your partner what is your favorite color. Just some real non-academic questions so that we can establish how we partner. What are the norms? How do we do this thing called turn and talk? And then after we practiced, we're going to practice some more. You know, I don't want you to get in the middle of partnering and be like, oh, that partnering thing, it's just such a flop. Really, we got to practice. We got to train the troops. Once we've trained the troops, start small. Teachers, the responsibility is on us. Make a note in your lesson where you are going to ask your students to turn and talk. Write down the question you're going to ask them. What is the salient point that you want your students to come away from this topic with? What's the big thing that you want them to learn? Jot that down in the form of a question that you can have your students partner to talk about. We think we're going to do it, but then we're in the middle of the lesson and we don't. So until you're really training your brain to do it time after time, write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it in your lesson plan to remind yourself. And then celebrate those good conversations. We've seen that there are so many benefits. So when your students follow your norms and they have those fantastic conversations, it is something to celebrate. And yes, shameless self-promotion. I have quoted myself on this slide, and I'm going to let you take a moment and read it. So here's what I really love about partnering. You have extroverts that need to talk. You have introverts who need think time, and sometimes they get to check out because they know the extroverts are going to answer. But what partnering does is it levels that playing field. Everybody gets a chance to be involved in the conversation. And what I found was that one, it saves so much time. It's actually much, much shorter than waiting on, and then calling on raised hands. But it also gives me such better quality responses. And those students who normally would not be the ones who perhaps wanted to answer my question, after they've had an opportunity to talk to a partner, it does build their confidence. It does make them more willing to share out. And then everyone is accountable because everybody has to give an answer. So here's what I want you to do now. I want you to think about what steps you can take to make the conversations even more successful in your classroom. If you are working with a partner, you can have a conversation about that. But even if you're not, you can now use that third link in the email to go to our Jamboard and put a sticky note here on our Jamboard to tell us the answer to this question. What are the steps you are going to take to make collaborative conversations more successful in your classroom? Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.